Welcome to Gaslit Nation. I'm your host, Andrea Chalupa, a journalist and filmmaker, and the writer and producer of the journalistic thriller Mr. Jones, about Stalin's genocide famine in Ukraine, a film the Kremlin and its useful idiots in the White House don't want you to see, so be sure to watch it. There's a lot happening, obviously, with idiots, the least qualified people on the planet, in charge of the most powerful military by far, and in service to the Kremlin. We're going to talk all about it in this week's bonus show, coming out later in the week, so look out for that. For now, I want to run this incredibly powerful and inspiring interview for all of us, because we have a very special guest who has been on the front lines of the fascist war against America for an incredibly long time, going face to face with these fascists. So she has a lot of lessons and inspiration for us today. Sandi Bachom. Sandi is an award-winning documentary filmmaker and a Getty Images contributor. She's licensed footage to major news outlets and films, including Laura Poitras' Oscar-nominated All the Beauty and All the Bloodshed, Hulu's Dopesick, and Alex Gibney's Crime of the Century. Sandi has captured white supremacist terrorism at Nazi rallies, including countless Trump rallies and the Tiki Torch March in Charlottesville, Virginia, where protester Heather Heyer was killed. Sandi's eyewitness account opens our discussion. Sandi was also at the Capitol on January 6, 2021, capturing footage of Donald Trump and his inner circle inciting a violent attempted coup against our democracy, footage that was later handed over to Congress. Later that day, she learned that her son, her only child, had died in his hotel room in Washington, D.C. from fentanyl. The Nazis Sandi exposes with her camera have tried to harass her by exploiting her son's death. But Sandi, who has interviewed Holocaust survivors for her film, Telling Jokes in Auschwitz, knows that the best way to overcome evil is to laugh and keep hunting Nazis, whether with a camera or through the power of the pen. So if Sandi can keep fighting Nazis, so can we. And don't forget, everyone, Gaslit Nation's book club meets this Monday, March 31 at 4 p.m. Eastern to discuss our book of the month, Gene Sharp's From Dictatorship to Democracy. This handbook for overthrowing dictators inspired revolts around the world, from Ukraine to the Arab Spring. You can find it in our show notes. To join the discussion, and it's free, by the way, because it's a handbook to overthrow the oligarchy. So of course it's free. Gene Sharp made it free. So go grab your copy. There's an audio version in the show notes. To join that discussion and support the show, grab a membership at patreon.com/gaslit. We offer discounted annual memberships. That's patreon.com/gaslit. Thank you to everyone who supports the show. In tribute now to Sandi Bachom and all she has done to bear witness to Trump's Russian-backed fascism trying to overthrow our democracy and destabilize the world, we call on our listeners to submit their own eyewitness accounts of living through the history chaotically, firecracking all over the place today. Help us combat gaslighting, hold on to your humanity, and give voice to your feelings and the historical truth carried in your body and mind. Share your important eyewitness account with the Gaslit Nation Archive Project. It's simple. Take our Reject Hypernormalization survey on our website. I'll link to it at the top of the show notes. And now, here's Nazi hunter Sandi Bachom. We'll begin by playing her footage of Patti Smith addressing Occupy Wall Street organizers at the Riverside Church on Martin Luther King Jr. Day in 2012. Listen to Patti Smith's words, a reminder to us all. The oligarchs are burning it all down, as we're all witnessing, and we, the people, are going to build it back stronger.
That the people have the power to redeem the work of fools. Upon beneath the gracious shower, it's decreed the people rule. And I believe everything we dream will come to pass through our union. We can turn the world around. We can turn the Earth's revolution. And the people have the power. The people have the power to cry, to occupy, to vote, to strike, to march, to live, to laugh, to dream, to love. Thank you.
Welcome to the show, real life Nazi hunter, Sandi Bachom.
Hello, Andrea.
So honored to have you here. You are a legend.
Maybe we should edit that out, actually. Seriously, you want to start over?
No, this is it. This is the good stuff. So tell me, when did you start hunting Nazis?
I went to Charlottesville in 2017 because somebody told me, another journalist told me that there was going to be the largest meeting of white supremacists in the country, and it was going to happen in Charlottesville, Virginia on this weekend. And I didn't have any money, and I took my last $200 because my ex-husband said, you have to go. I didn't even know what a white supremacist was. I took a bus down to Charlottesville, and I got there, and then I saw all these people in Hitler t-shirts, and I got an interview with David Duke and people doing the Heil Hitler. It was my indoctrination into white supremacy and neo-Nazis.
And that was the protest where a Nazi drove a car.
Yeah. And James Fields Jr., and I filmed him all day. And I kind of watched him. I didn't know it was him until afterwards, but I watched him kind of become radicalized as the day progressed. He showed up early in the morning with a group of guys in khaki pants, and he went by himself into the park. And then as the day progressed, the next thing I know, he's in the park with thousands of guys with these little shields, and he's standing with one of the main groups that I think they were called American Vanguard or Vanguard America. They evacuated the park about noon, I think, because people were armed in there. They had guns. And so the cops evacuated. They said they'd be arrested if they did. And they all streamed out. And then he walked right in front of me, chanting, "Jews will not replace us." But first the group of them said, "You will not replace us." And then all of a sudden they said, "Jews will not replace us." And we all thought we were hearing things because, I didn't even know what that meant. And then later on in the day, I was injured, actually, and I got taken to the hospital.
How did you get injured?
Somebody cut me off. It tripped me, not intentionally, but there was a surge at the end of the day when everybody was leaving, and there would be little ruckuses around the city, and all the press and all the people that were there with their iPhones and stuff were following them. And I saw a militia guy that was bleeding, and he was being carried by his other militia friends, and I went to shoot it, and somebody cut me off, and I tripped, and I fell forward, and I cracked my head open, and I broke my arm, and so they took me to the hospital, and that was the hospital where they took all the victims. And 10 minutes later, from the time that I fell, was the time that Fields ran through the crowd, and I was on my way there. And when I was in the hospital, it was really weird. It was really quiet. There were a lot of doctors there. And I'm like in horrible pain. And I go, "Help me here, help me when I'm bleeding." And a woman came over to me. She was dressed in a clergy outfit. She was some kind of pastor. And she said, "I'm not supposed to tell you this, but somebody died." And I was trying to look in the rooms. I was in the hallway to look in the rooms and see what was going on in the news. They were all watching it on the news. And all the nurses and doctors were watching YouTube videos of it. So I found out later they were trying to see what kind of injuries people had because they were all brought to the hospital. And then at one point, this couple, when they were sewing me up, this couple comes in and they would look dazed, and they take out the camera and they show me, it said, "Is this you?" And I was on the ground. And they had been hit by flying bodies, this couple. And I said, "Yeah, that's me." And that's how, kind of it got me involved in documenting these people, because my job is to point my camera at them and document who shows up at these events. So I did that from then on.
So when the car rammed through the Charlottesville protest, killing Heather Heyer,
Yeah.
bodies flying everywhere, and Heather Heyer's last tweet was, "If you're not furious, you're not paying attention."
Oh, yeah. It was really a call to action, wasn't it? I remember reading that. I'm not sure that's the exact words, but that's when I realized I'm 80 years old and I was born during World War II. I'm what's called a war baby. And my uncle was shot down by the Nazis in 1942. And my great-grandfather fought in the Civil War.
So you come from a family of Nazi hunters, is what you're saying?
Of Antifa. I'm a family of anti-fascists, because anybody who resists fascism is an anti-fascist. I always said I was kind of like Zelig with a camera, as it would wind up just oddly at all of these situations like Charlottesville. And then a year after Charlottesville, I heard that Gavin McInnes, who was the head of the Proud Boys, was speaking at the Republican Club. I'm sure it was the Young Republican Club on the Upper East Side. And I went there and I stood outside the door and I filmed people going in and I filmed them going out. I just stayed there all night. And at the end of the evening, they left and we followed them. And that's when this street brawl happened, where they had this violent street brawl, which kind of put them on the map, actually.
The Proud Boys.
The Proud Boys, I'm sorry. Yeah. So that video was the only video of the event, and I was a witness in the trial, got subpoenaed. I had to testify in the trial. And now I see them and they yell at me. They're so horrible to me. But seriously, fuck them. Look, if you're going to behave badly in front of my camera, is it my fault? I just turn the camera on and they just do what they do, Then the whole thing of me following these people escalated, and I met a whole bunch of journalists in Charlottesville. After that we are sort of a group that follows these groups around the country when we can afford to.
So you were also there. I just want to say, we're living in a time where the Nazi in chief, well, there's two Nazi in chiefs in the White House, Elon and Trump.
Yeah.
They are doing what Stalin and what Putin do. They are erasing history and rewriting history. The Navajo code breakers, they wiped them from the website. The Native American who was at Iwo Jima, they wiped him from the website. On and on the list goes. If you were a hero, an American patriot hero, including from a group that faced genocide in the establishment in the United States, they are trying to erase you. That is Stalinist. Hey, Gaslit Nation listeners, I'm excited to share that I have some sort of cosmic relationship with the super delicious and nutritious and fast meal plan service, Factor. Healthy gourmet meals delivered to your home and heated up in a few short minutes. Factor tends to come into my life when I'm juggling a million deadlines at once. Their juice smoothies are my favorite and help me burn the midnight oil to fight fascism through my podcast and art projects that keep me sane. Seriously, Factor, thank you. I can't recommend them enough. Also, my mother-in-law was visiting from Paris and she approves as well. And she's very Parisian, if you know what I mean. So that's another endorsement. Now my listeners can find a meal plan that works for their lifestyle and get 50% off. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/gaslit50off and use code gaslit50off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code gaslit50off at factormeals.com/gaslit50off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box.
Yesterday was the anniversary of Stalin and Hitler meeting to come up with this secret pact to go against
the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact.
Yeah. And I interview Holocaust survivors, and I'm working on a film now with one of them, interviews that I've done with him over the years. And he warned us about this. The first thing he said, everybody asked, how did it happen? He was thrown in Auschwitz. He was thrown in 3 different death camps. And he said, the first thing that happens is the change of language, the hate of the other. In his case, it was the Jews. But look what Trump did in the beginning with all Mexicans are rapists, right? That was like that was the beginning of the language change and normalizing that kind of language. All Mexicans are rapists. there was a fight at Trump Tower with a bunch of Mexican guys, and I think they sued Trump, and it doesn't do any good. The reason this works for them, it goes back a little bit further. So the first Trump rally I went to was in Minneapolis in 2019. And at one point he stops he gives the same speech every single time. It's exactly the same speech. And then he just plugs in whatever the latest, Hunter Biden's laptop, whatever it is. And he points to the press, because I'm credentialed press. We were in a pen in the middle of the arena. And he goes, "You'll never get the truth out of them. They're fake news. They're the enemy of the people." And everybody turns around and gives us a finger and goes, "Boo." And it was so shocking to me. But this beating away at the free press has been going on for years. Every single time he gets in front of a microphone, if you'll notice, he talks about, "I expected that from you. You're fake news." He has trained them to not believe anything they read. So he has actually said, "Don't believe what you see, only believe what I say." So he's brainwashed them. And I believe his techniques are actual brainwashing. The techniques that he uses are brainwashing.
Well, you witness it. So you talk about how it's repetitive.
There's this incredible documentary by Errol Morris that people should take a look at. It's about the Manson murders.
Oh, I watched it.
Did you? And about the mind control that he probably learned in prison. And Morris wasn't too keen on the idea that it was the CIA, whatever that was called, the CIA mind control experiments that they were doing. But his parole officer was involved in those experiments, apparently. But I really think that he learned it in prison. And I don't know in the weeds you want to go on this, but after Hurricane Sandy hit, I went out and I filmed people that had lost everything. And a lot of them were low income, and several of them had been in jail. And there was a guy who became the leader. He was this charismatic guy. He'd lost everything. And he became the leader of this group that I followed. And he had done a lot of time in prison. And one of the women pointed out, she said, "Don't trust him, because there's this book called The 75 Laws of Power," I think it is. I have to look up the exact title of it. It's banned in prisons now, and it tells you how to manipulate people and mind control and get people to do stuff for you, which this guy got all of us to do things for him and give him money and all sorts of things. I didn't have any money, but he somehow got me to give him some money. And they learned this stuff in prison. So anyway, Manson, he was in this list of people and this book. They create a cult. Steve Jobs was on the list. He created a cult around Apple, right? And then what Manson would do is he would isolate them. He would give them acid, and then he would fill their brains with, I guess the mind control techniques the CIA techniques were to make somebody insane instantly.
MK Ultra. So it was Operation MK Ultra, where the CIA was literally infiltrating college groups. They were on Haight-Ashbury. And what they would do is they would do these human experiments to subjects that were unwitting. They didn't realize what was going on. And they were feeding acid. Sometimes they would use prostitutes to lure in these subjects. And they would give them acid and just see how they could manipulate them. And the idea was that the CIA wanted to learn how to control people and get them to kill. And so this was all happening at a time when Robert Kennedy was assassinated, and his assassin didn't remember a damn thing. And he's like, "I just went blank and I don't remember it."
Really? I didn't know that.
MK Ultra is sadistic. It's like, I've studied decades of the Soviet Union. This is like up there with one of the darker chapters of the Soviet Union, the human experiments, how they ruined people, how creepy it is. And when it became a huge public story, it was all happening against the backdrop of Watergate, which the CIA was also central to. We're in a very dark chapter in America, but we've kind of always been in a dark chapter in America. Yeah. There's always this group of people. And I know this sounds very conspiratorial, but it's just the facts. Power attracts sadists. Power attracts people that want to inflict control and dominance and cruelty on others. And that's what they were doing.
But remember, Trump is a Russian asset.
On top of it, yeah, no, the Russians are, before the CIA was like against the Russians, and now the CIA is working with the Russians. So now it's like all new territory. We haven't been here yet.
Yeah. What he does in the, first of all, you wait in line for hours or maybe a day or something. They wait in line to get in. The whole thing is orchestrated, right? And then when you finally get inside the arena and you can't leave. Did you ever hear of EST, EST, the Earhart Seminar trainings?
No.
In the 70s, I was in advertising and everybody did these. It really was mind control. It was the beginning of the human potential movement. So it was in the early 70s. So it came out of the 60s. And you would go and you would stay in a hotel room. They'd lock you away from everything. You couldn't pee for 24 hours. You were stuck in this room. And the trainer would take you on these guided meditations, and they would tell you your life didn't work. And the Ku Klux Klan, all of these groups, they get these disenfranchised people in the room and they say, your life doesn't work. You know, you're a piece of shit. You're never going to go anywhere. You hate your wife, you know. But I have the answer. And that's what Trump would do in these rallies. It was blaming everybody. It was, you know, Obama's fault. It was Hillary's fault or whatever. And only I can save you. He's actually said that. Only I can save you. So you go into this room and for 3 hours after you've waited in line for all those hours, then inside they're playing music. And the first time I saw them dancing the YMCA, I was out on the floor with them. And, you know, YouTube took this video down, but I was like running around with my camera in the middle of it. And they were going, why? And they would go YMCA and they'd spell out the letters with their hands. And I said to a friend, I said, do they have any idea what that song is about? You know, it's about going to a bathhouse and picking up guys. And it doesn't really matter because now that's his song and that's his dance. And because of what I know, because my experience of having been hypnotized, basically, I understand that process and how susceptible people can fall victim to it. But he's a master at it. You know, he's a showman. Everything is like the, not to jump around, but you know that video, the glossy video of the El Salvador kidnappings? The video that they posted about the planes that, you know, that's what this whole thing in front of the judge is now.
Oh, where Trump and Stephen Miller very sneakily sent these 2 planes.
Yeah.
With so-called gang members that they were deporting without due process. At the same time, the judge was blocking this order.
After one of the planes left, after he said you can't do it.
Right. And they just went ahead and did it. And they're like, yeah, it's over international water. We can't do anything now.
Yeah. And that is actually happening soon. But what I believe happened, because I'm a producer my whole life, produced television commercials for 40 years, you know, at the top ad agencies in the world. And that video was so extravagantly produced, edited, scored.
Where they glorified skirting the law, basically. They glorified defying the courts by making this gauzy video.
Yeah, but what the insidious thing is that they said that this was the people on the planes. But what happened was the planes were like in the air on Saturday. The planes left on Saturday, the 15th, I think, something like that. And at 8 o'clock the next morning, Bukele, the president of El Salvador, released this video. And then it was amplified by Musk to his 200 million followers, whatever. And then it went through the disinformation amplification network. And they implied that those were the people on the planes. But that video was so glossily produced, because this is what I do. You know, it was drone footage. It was editing to close-ups. It was lights flashing, you know, heads shaved, tattoos, you know, and then it had taken days. So that video was produced way in advance of the flights. And I believe, conspiracy theorists, that this was the test of the courts. I filmed this guy, Holman, at the Rod of Iron. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. You know what the Rod of Iron is?
No, what's the Rod of Iron?
The Rod of Iron is the gun cult. They worship the AR-15s, and it's the son of Sun Myung Moon, this guy named Sean Moon. It's out in Pennsylvania, and I filmed it for 3 years, and Mike Flynn was out there. Mike Flynn is back, by the way. He's in the meetings now. Did you notice that? Michael Flynn is now back in the White House. And he spoke, and this guy Holman spoke. And, he said exactly what he's saying now. We're coming for you. And this was before the election. They knew, because they knew they were going to win the election. And this, I believe, is the constitutional crisis that we've all been talking about, because when they defy the court, then that is when we're in deep, deep doo-doo. And that's what I believe, that this whole kabuki around this video and the planes leaving in defiance of the court, and now they're going to say, like Coleman says, we don't care about the courts. We're coming for you. So watch that, because I think that's the big one. And when the courts don't work anymore, democracy's over. What do you think about that?
It's kind of funny because they packed so many ideologues in there, so they can kind of use the courts in certain places. So they don't need to defy the courts, just the judges actually doing their job by upholding the Constitution. So the funny thing is that they could get judges that rubber stamp what they're doing. I think the whole thing is a constitutional crisis. I don't think we need to point to one. I think it's been a constitutional crisis since 2016, when Trump came to power illegally with the Kremlin's help. When you have longtime Kremlin operative Paul Manafort running your campaign for free, and you have a meeting with Russian intelligence in Trump Tower with the very people, Jared and Don Jr. and Manafort, who are running your campaign.
Yeah.
And that's June 2016. And then a few weeks later, suddenly WikiLeaks releases all this hacked material by the Russians taken from Democrats to DNC. And it's all carefully orchestrated, and the media is falling for it like catnip because they're immature.
Yeah.
And America is an undeveloped democracy. We're a teenager in the world, a hot hormonal teenager. So I think the whole thing has been a constitutional crisis. And people that have studied authoritarianism for decades, like I have been screaming about it and warning people and called crazy, hysterical, conspiracy theorists. But we were right. And unfortunately, the last thing that I want to say is that Americans had the chance to avoid this. We had the chance, because he told us from the very beginning who he was and what he wanted to do. He was very clear about it.
Yeah.
You did not need to study authoritarianism to understand it. He was telling us the entire election in 2016, he couldn't say anything bad about Vladimir Putin. Like you pointed out, Mexican judge, Mexican rapist, all the hate speech, blasting a reporter with disabilities, all of it was there from the very beginning. And unfortunately, Americans have to get initiated into the group of people, which was a very long list across this planet, who have experienced dictatorship firsthand.
Yeah. And
obviously, Jewish people don't need this. Non-white people don't need this. Japanese Americans don't need this. They did internment already on U.S. soil. And there's a long list of groups that don't need that initiation and tried to stop him. But for the rest, they unfortunately need to go through it themselves. And there's no guarantee even after that they'll be wiser after. I mean, Poland suffered under dictatorship, but they still had a wannabe autocrat for a while, a Trumpian government. It's not a panacea, it's not a guarantee, but that's where we are. So I seen an event about that because it's pretty infuriating that we could have stopped this. So many people that could have stopped it failed us.
Manafort, I went to Trump's first press conference in 2016. It was in July 11th of 2016. Manafort had just been brought on out of nowhere. Who was the guy he worked for? The Russian oligarch he worked for?
Deripaska. He was announced back in March.
Right. So March he came on, and this press conference was in July 11th, and Manafort had just introduced Pence a few days earlier to Trump.
To get the evangelical vote.
Yeah. Well, this press conference, the video's on YouTube, is so fascinating because the whole press conference was all about the evangelicals. And he said, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the evangelicals. And so he was wooing. This was Manafort's and Bannon's doing, bringing in, and probably Flynn too, bringing in the evangelicals. And that's when you have already a cult, the white evangelicals, I'm not saying all religious, these guys. But the white evangelicals, I was raised a Christian. This is nothing, any Christianity. I was raised about God is love, and, help people less fortunate than you. Anyway, so he brings on Mike Pence, and Mike Pence says at this press conference, he says, I'm a Christian, I'm a Republican, and I'm a conservative. Or something like that, in that order. So number one, he's a Christian. And right after that was the convention. I mean, Pence was brought on a matter of days before the convention. And the only thing, as you recall, that Manafort changed one thing in the platform was about Ukraine. My opinion, this whole thing has been about Ukraine from the very get-go, right? So then Manafort gives, and this didn't make any sense to me till I went to the inauguration. He gave the polling data to the Russians. And I didn't really understand what that meant until I interviewed a guy at the this inauguration in DC, and he had a sign that said he was the #1 door knocker in Georgia. And he was like a really reasonable guy. And I said, well, what does that mean? He said, there's an app they have in this town in Georgia, which was a swing state, right? In all the swing states, they did this. They have an app that told you if the door you're knocking on, if they're Christian, if they own a gun, if they vote regularly in elections or they miss a year, which for some reason is a hook for them. It means they're changeable. If you vote for Obama, then you don't vote, and then you maybe vote for Trump, Because rumor has it in the conspiracy mill is that Musk fooled with the tabulation machines in the swing states, because it didn't make any sense that all the swing states went to Trump and that they announced it 4 hours before the election was closed. I think Elon's 4-year-old son said it in a video, they'll never find out. It's like, we sound like crazy conspiracy theorists, but it's true. When does it become not a conspiracy theory and actual fact? So it's been in the works my mother was a member of the John Birch Society. It's been in the works since the 50s, probably longer ago, maybe, but at least since the 50s. And I don't know how we're going to get out of it, And then this Musk thing is just terrifying. I have a lot of followers on Twitter. I had a lot of followers. I had 250,000 followers on Twitter. Will always be Twitter to me. I used to actually make a living. I live on Social Security and licensing my footage, and people would support my work. But when he bought it, he blocked me immediately, and he took me out of the algorithm. I don't know if you've experienced this yourself. And people just don't see me anymore. For some reason, I'm getting like millions of hits on things again. So maybe I'm back in. I filmed my phone where I called Social Security, and that has 2 million views, I think, on Twitter. But he's manipulating everything. That's why these Tesla protests are so powerful, because anybody can do them. Anybody. People ask me, what do I do? I want to get involved. So now all of a sudden people are saying, well, it's a little late, but better late than never. They're saying, what can I do? What can I do? I said, well, you can find your local resistance group or a national resistance group, make a sign, handmade sign, go to a Tesla showroom every Saturday across the country there,
I think there's a lot that people can still do to resist and take back our country. And I think it's important for us to see it as it's not the Democratic Party that's going to save us, because they helped get us into this mess. There's no central power dynamic that is as organized as these fascists are. They didn't have an answer for any of this, even though they knew very well that the war is in the states, in these state houses on this grassroots level.
Yeah.
The Republicans have been fighting and taking over our democracy, as you said, decades ago, and they waged that warfare in the states government. Despite all that, it was grassroots groups like States Project, which I donate to, which gave far more money in 2024 to these state races for the Democrats than the actual Democratic Party. We're not going to get out of this from some central operating system. It's very much a decentralized resistance, which actually makes it more insidious which makes us more dangerous to them because it's a leaderless movement, and that's the best movement you want. And you want a lot of people flooding it. You want a lot of people showing up and protesting in, Tesla dealerships.
Yeah.
And you want people being creative and bobbing and weaving. When they zip that way, we zag that way. You've got to exhaust them. You got to rope-a-dope them.
Yeah.
And force them to spend more and more money trying to stop us and block us. And it's not going to work because they're radicalizing so many people with their own destruction. They're awakening so many of their own voters to their own cruelty because you have these Trump voters that married South American women who are now losing their wives on the border when they come back from a vacation. It's like, you snatched my wife. I have no idea where she is. She's in some private prison in Louisiana, and I'm spending all my money, the down payment on the home we're going to buy, on lawyer fees because you, Trump, who we voted for. It's just crazy. So it's going to be a painful lesson. We could have avoided it. Unfortunately, a lot of people that did try to fight it and stop it are going to get swept up in the cruelty. And it's not fair. It's not right. It's not our fault. If you listen to the show and you made your phone calls and knocked on doors and you made sure you vote, it wasn't your fault. But we all still need to fight like our lives depend on it, because they do. And so do the lives of so many of our fellow citizens and global citizens around the world. And so I do want to ask you, you were there on January 6th. You witnessed that. So much of what you've witnessed and recorded is archives of now that future historians will depend on to make sense of this moment.
Yeah.
And I know this for a fact because in my research as a historian and filmmaker, I've depended on people like you that existed back in the 1930s and 1940s to make sense of that time.
Yes.
And so you're invaluable to future historians. And yes, there will be future historians, and they're going to want to know the people's history, the eyewitness history, because if we are forced to be underground for a bit, in exile for a bit, they're going to rewrite history just like Putin and Stalin did, right? And so we cannot let them do that. So what are you doing to preserve the countless hours of footage you've taken? Like, where's your library going to be? You should obviously have a place abroad, not just in the US.
It's so interesting you say that because I'd just like to say something about eyewitnesses, because I am working on this film. I had created this thing with Holocaust survivors, a little website called Last Eyewitness Project. And it was over the years, the Holocaust survivors, when I was lucky enough to find them, I would put the videos up, but you can find it on the internet. And one of the men that I met was a teacher, and he would teach his experience in the Holocaust to school children that were his age when he was taken by the Gestapo, which was 13 years old. Came to his house. So he's dead now. He was in his 90s when he died. And the film I'm working on now is interviews with him, and it's called The Last Eyewitness. Because when the last eyewitness is gone, we are left to stories about what people think happened. So we have to preserve. I could be the last eyewitness to democracy. I'm the last eyewitness to what happened on January 6th, because I'm 80. I'm in my last chapter, however long it goes. And I tell people, when they see something on the street like these groups, Patriot Front, which I've filmed, and Blood Tribe, and the Goyim Defense League, when they do these, all of a sudden they're in Nashville or they're in some obscure city in Iowa or something, get your phone out and start shooting and become a citizen journalist. That's how I started at Occupy Wall Street, became a citizen journalist at Occupy Wall Street. So that's one thing that's one like tangible thing you can do. I tell people to do that. And because we have to document this, they have apparently disappeared. Now that Elon's in there, God knows what all the January 6th committee stuff is. It's come to light that one of the January 6th hostages, all of his, the discovery is gone. All the video is gone. So if they did it to one guy, what are they doing to the rest of it? So myself and my colleagues that were there were a lot, I always wanted to do a film of just, we were everywhere. We were at each entrance. I was on the west side. My friends were on the east side. When the Oath Keepers broke in, my friends were inside. They're in one window in the east side, and the window on the right side, and on the west side when the Proud Boy, I filmed the Proud Boys coming up to the Washington Monument at 10 o'clock the morning of January 6th. And Enrique Tarrio, who was the leader, had been arrested, so he wasn't there. But we always believed that he took himself out of the scene specifically, so whatever happened, he would either still be around to, I don't know what the reason was, but we're pretty sure. All the films that have been made about it. One friend of mine did a film called 64 Days, and he was the one that was doing the documentary on the Proud Boys, Nick Quested. He was the first witness in the January 6th hearings, and we all kind of agree that Enrique took himself out. So in that group was all of the Proud Boys that were sent to jail for 22 years for seditious conspiracy. And I said, oh, good, I'm safe, right? I'll be 110 when Enrique gets out. And there they are. They had a press conference. I mean, I'm sure I'll see them again. I did see Gavin McInnes. They do a documentary on me. And that my meeting with Gavin McInnes will be in that documentary. So I won't tell you about that. But the importance of everybody being an eyewitness, because when the eyewitnesses are gone, they can say anything they want. They can say the Holocaust never happened, which they do. Nick Fuentes, whom I have filmed a couple of times, is a Holocaust denier. And he's so blatant about it. I used to think that was his gimmick. I thought that was just his hook, that he didn't really believe it. But he really believes that the Jews are horrible people and the Holocaust never happened, and he's a horrible anti-Semite, as most of them are, as Trump is, by the way. You know what David Duke said in Charlottesville? He said, we're here to support the policies of Donald Trump. That's why we voted for him. Was the head of the Ku Klux Klan, the former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. When Trump was elected the first time, there were 100,000 people in the streets. 50,000 people at a march would show up. And I think people are starting to wake up, seeing what's happening in Serbia and what's happening in Europe, 1 million people in the streets. And that's the way to bring down a despot, is the people. Patti Smith, she sang this song at Occupy Wall Street. I'd never heard it before. It says, and the people have the power to redeem the work of fools. It's decreed on the meek, the grace is showered. It's decreed, the people rule. And we have forgotten that. We have forgotten it's up to you to get your ass out into the street. If you're not going to get to the fucking polls, which 8 million didn't, you can rectify that. Get out there, there's one woman who's with Rise and Resist. Rise and Resist is a wonderful group in New York. They did the die-in down in Wall Street that was on Rachel Maddow. They're relentless. They do every Tuesday. They go to Fox News and they hold their signs up and they did. They started these Tesla protests. Well, Elon Musk put them on a list, and they're being investigated for domestic terrorism. The people in this group they're 60s, 70s, 80s, and one woman is 92, and she went inside the Tesla dealership on her red walker. And I've got video of her walking by the red Tesla sign with her. And I said, how old are you? She says, 92. I said, when did you first start protesting? She said, the Vietnam War, which is my generation, So we still have hope. I know that you agree with that. We're not giving up yet, right?
Absolutely not. They're assholes. Why make it easy for them?
Be a pain in their ass. Just be a fucking irritant.
Exactly.
If that is your only job, they hate me. They call me the things they say to me, they say I killed my son. Total 21-year-old little pishers in line at a Trump rally goes, oh, you killed your son. It's just bad parenting. Who gives them permission to take my personal tragedy of the loss of my son and just say to an 80-year-old woman, I killed this is where we are. Stuff that Gavin McInnes said to me. You miserable cunt, he said. You miserable cunt. I never met him before. You put 2 innocent people in jail, he said. But the thing that put 2 innocent people in jail are 12 jurors. Yeah, it wasn't me. I didn't even see who started the fight. You know, I just happened to be a witness. What we do is uncomfortable. You think it's comfortable for me to get yelled at by these guys? And I don't give a shit because I'm old and I'm going to continue to do this to my last breath. And what's your excuse? If I'm 80, you know, everybody's got an iPhone. That's how we get them. Everybody takes out their iPhone. That's what we did at Occupy Wall Street. They would say, the cops are coming, right? And everybody, they say, grab your cameras. It was the most photographed event at that time in history, was those days in Zuccotti Park. And that's how I learned how to shoot that kind of conflict journalism like that. If I can do it, you can do it. There's no excuse anymore. And if you love this country the way I do, he perverted the flag. He humps the flag. I got him at CPAC hugging and molesting the flag of the United States of America. My uncle is buried in Arlington. My other uncle was shot down when he was 19 years old by the fucking Nazis, shot him down over the English Channel. They never found his body. So I do it for them. And I just hope we can get the numbers together. And at the very least, just be an irritant. You know, go to the town halls. You know, I went to this town hall. I'm just starting to post it now. And the response is really incredible. You know, it was the first question, because the town halls are asking, and I'm going to continue going to the town halls because they can't get the Republicans to go. So the Democrats have a town hall. They have a town hall in the Republican district. And then they have, in this case, it was Tom Malinowski who had lost the seat to the Republican guy. And then the people get a chance to ask the questions that we're all asking. What country abolishes the Department of Education? And Tom, without missing a beat, said, the Taliban? You know? And so that's valuable. Document that. Put it up on YouTube. Put it up on Instagram. We all have a role here.
What advice do you have for people who are in red states where they feel outnumbered and they're scared and they know that if they show up at this protest, there could be violence?
I don't know about the violence, but, you know, I wanted to do, and I think I'm going to do it. I want to make a little card for how to responsibly protest.
You should.
Because you have rights on the street. It's your First Amendment right to assemble, as long as it's not violent. And what I do when it gets violent, I did it in Charlottesville. I did it at the Capitol. I run the other way. I turn around and I'll leave it to my friends to get up close with these guys. And I use a zoom lens, you know, I get far away as possible. What a great opportunity to be in a red state. You can go to these town halls. Do you see what's happening at the town halls with that veteran? He says, you took away my benefits. You took away my Social Security. Once they go into Social Security and they go into Medicaid, there's going to be a shift because it's going to hurt the red states more, I believe, supposedly, you know, than the blue states. I would not survive if it didn't have Medicare and Social Security. I was in a car accident. I didn't walk for a year. I worked my whole life, made a lot of money. Then I lost everything. I was run over by a car. I got a crook lawyer who stole my money, got me evicted. You know? And I applied early for Social Security. And every month I know that check's going to get deposited. But now I'm worried. What do I do? Where do you go? Who are you going to call if they don't deposit your check? What do you do? Get out there, and in the red states, you will find allies. If you go to a Tesla protest, you will find allies. There's indivisible groups all over the country. And I think more and more are going to spring up. But go to the Facebook groups of these, you know, Rise and Resist in New York has a Facebook group. They'll tell you how to do it. They give courses in how to peacefully, civil disobedience courses, you know, and just be a pain in their ass. An 80-year-old woman with an iPhone, you cannot believe the havoc I can wreak with an iPhone. So that's my advice.
When to join the conversation? Shape the show by becoming a member of Gaslit Nation on Patreon. Join our community of listeners for exclusive Q&A sessions, bonus shows, get all episodes ad-free, invites to live events, and more. Most importantly, connect with other listeners in our group chat and committees, planting seeds of change. Sign up at patreon.com/gaslit. Gaslit Nation hosts Resilience Political Salons every Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern. Can't make it live? Recordings are available to our community on Patreon. Salons are your space to vent, ask questions, and connect with other listeners who also really hate Nazis. To help Ukraine with urgently needed humanitarian aid, join me in donating to Razom for Ukraine at razomforukraine.org. To help refugees in conflict zones, donate to Doctors Without Borders at doctorswithoutborders.org. And if you want to help critically endangered orangutans already under pressure from the palm oil industry, donate to the Orangutan Project at theorangutanproject.org. Gaslit Nation is produced by Andrea Chalupa. Our editing wizard is Nicholas Torres, and our associate producer is Carlin Daigle. If you like what we do, leave us a review on iTunes. It helps us reach more listeners. And check out our Patreon. It keeps us going. Original music in Gaslit Nation is produced by David Whitehead, Martin Vissenberg, Nick Farr, Damian Arriaga, and Carlin Daigle. Our logo design was donated to us by Hamish Smythe of the New York-based firm Order. Thank you so much, Hamish. Gaslit Nation would like to thank our supporters at the producer level on Patreon and higher. Abby Zavos, Ice Bear is Defiant, Todd, Dan, Milo, and Cubby, Ruth Ann Harnish, Lily Wachowski, TBL92666, because we're fighting the Antichrist, Sherry Escobar, Sydney Davies, Work for Better, Prep for Trouble, John Schoenthaler, Ellen McGirt, Larry Gasson, Ann Bertino, David East, Mark, Sean Berg, Kristen Custer, Kevin Gannon, Sandra Collins, Katie Masuris, James D. Leonard, he writes his name in caps, Leo Chalupa, Carol Golstad, Marcus J. Trent, Joe Darcy, D.L. Singfield, Nicole Spear, Abby Rode, Jans Alstrup Rasmussen, Mark again, Sarah Gray, Diana Gallagher, Leah Campbell, Jared Lombardo, Ann Marshall, and Tanya Chalupa. Thank you all so much for your support. We could not make Gaslit Nation without you.